CMS and ONC held a meeting for long-term and post-acute care.
Okay.
And this was back in around 2013. They started, they began to, as we began to look at the patient as the center of the model, that group came together and said, well, we need a plan of health for our patients, because the high-risk patients who are in long-term post-acute care, home care and hospice and some of those other areas, weren't able, they were going from one provider to the other. And so the eCare plan was just beginning to come about within HL7, and they tagged on to that, especially for chronic care management. And chronic care management, CMS was paying physicians for chronic care management under the team-based codes. And their first aspect was actually to force the physicians to use an electronic care plan as a means for documenting chronic care conditions and or chronic care management. And it was interesting, and it was also related to transitions of care. But that's where they really started to push the eCare plan, and where we began to jump onto, we meaning the pharmacy profession, began to jump onto the pharmacist's electronic care plan, creating a profile that was specific with examples for pharmacists and the system vendors to get them to adopt what at that time was CCDA and the CCDA standard. But we were lucky enough because we worked with the Lantana Consulting Group, and that Lantana Consulting Group, which was part of an ONC high impact pilot, along with CCNC and Pioneer RX was one also, that Rick Geimer, who was one of the co-chairs for the HL7 Structured Documents Work Group, they were beginning to work on CCDA on FHIR, which is really the FHIR standard. And it just because organizations such as yourselves really didn't have the older architecture built into an EHR, you picked up on FHIR really quick, because what it stands for is Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. They're pre-programmed concepts and ways of exchanging very fast. So before, if you're building a CCDA structured document, that could take you months to do the programming on it. But with FHIR, you can program within hours of what would have taken you months to do. And we were just lucky enough that we had that ability to be the test for CCDA on FHIR, and it's taken off from there. And we finished the Release 4 ballot back in May 2020, and we're moving forward as the government is beginning to write regulations for FHIR. We're right in step with what is happening with the other with government agencies and regulations, so we can be interoperable with other types of care providers and part of the care team.
Right. Well, interestingly, and maybe ironically, all of the pharmacy vendors, I think with the exception of one or two, adopted FHIR.
Yeah, we didn't do CCDA.
We skipped right over it. It was burdensome to develop. But the interesting thing is all of the EHRs were already embedded in CCDA.
Right. That's where we thought we were going to see some success when we were submitting care plans originally, when we first when we first cracked this out. And then we were like, oh, everyone's still using the old standard.
Yeah. Our initial goal was, cool, CPSN's a great place to send care goals, but it can't be the only place. Right. So at some point, we're going to have to exchange information with EHRs and be able to consume and make clinical decisions off of that, or we've just created an extra piece of work. And then we find out that the EHRs are 2 years away from being able to accept FHIR documents. But Shelly, what do you think? They're getting closer, right?
Oh, yes. There is a huge, well, I don't know if you know this, but actually I was on the ONC, what they call Health IT Advisory Committee call today. We have a new national coordinator, Mickey Tripathi. And I've known Mickey for quite a few years, and he's very good. And CMS is beginning to write regulations now for fire. And more interesting, there is a huge project, and you probably know this, Josh, on the payer side with the health plans. I'm not talking about the PBMs. I'm talking about the health plans themselves with the Da Vinci Project to really leverage their technology to capture information directly from EHRs. And we're right in step with the Pharmacist Electronic Care Plan, which fits nicely into pharmacy models because we're used to dealing with payers and we're used to dealing in that particular type of a community because the physician's offices especially are not really prepared at this time to accept fire types of eCare plans.
Right.
And until they build out their workflow. But there is a push by the government, a huge push with the interoperability rule and the information blocking rule to really push those organizations to adopt the fire resources and the exchange of clinical information.
You know, I don't want this to devolve into an hour long of nerding out about IT, but once you
that's what we do.
Yeah,
that's kind of what we do.
Sorry, that's what I do.
That's kind of what we do here in a way.
We live that. But you know, like one of the things that kind of is on the mind, like I see a lot of research around it as well, is once you can share that information, you create a new problem, which is what do you do with it? Right? Imagine if you're imagine if you're Epic and you're getting MedList updates for patients from, you know, say somebody goes from a hospital inpatient setting to a post-acute care into an LTC and then maybe back to the hospital in that 30-day window. You could potentially have 4 care plans just with that. And then you have pharmacy care plans come in. So now you've got 6 or 7 different lists of allergies, 6 or 7 different lists of health conditions, med recs that have happened 5 or 6 times. So you have the single source of truth problem that we still have to solve.
I totally agree. But once I think those organizations realize that a pharmacist has reconciled the med list and there's some trust that goes with, and you have actors that you can identify where that care plan came from, that you're more apt to take that information as the source of truth. Now, any organization that's receiving information is going to have to do some type of reconciliation, whether that's immunization reconciliation or medication reconciliation, allergy problem list. They're all going to have some type of reconciliation process that they go through. And so that's something that even pharmacists are going to have to deal with that also. So it's not anything new to what we're doing from a paper standpoint as opposed to an electronic standpoint. We just have to work the workflow of all of that information into a dashboard that's going to help those providers do that type of reconciliation.
Right. Yeah, it's just the you were drinking from a slow-moving fountain before, and now you're drinking straight out of a fire hydrant.
Well, I mean, but again, you're drinking out of a fire hydrant in a manual process. The issue is you're not paying attention to the information that's coming in, whether that's verbally or electronically or by paper. And so there's nothing new to that. But we think that by leveraging the technology portion, you can then adopt machine learning or artificial intelligence to weed through some of the areas so that your algorithms are actually set up in a way that you're receiving the information. That's what the vendors have to begin to do. And they haven't, and I don't mean Pioneer X, I mean the larger EHR vendors.
We'll take it though. Yeah.
And that was in our last pharmacy HIT meeting that I went to. I missed last one. Sorry about that. I'm in trouble.
Shelly's gonna yell at you.
But, one of the things we talked about is we found, with the care plan specifically, if they're not integrated into the workflow, they just don't happen.
Yeah, they don't. Not at scale.
Right. And a lot of those is we'll be able to receive all that information and be able to distill it down and be like, all right, here's the 5 important things. Okay, go. That's really the beauty of what we can do from an IT perspective.